Hi, good morning. My name is Jamie Roice-Gomes, and I am the manager of the Living with Fire program. Welcome to the Living with Fire virtual series. This series is part of the Nevada Wildfire Awareness Campaign, and it is brought to you by the Bureau of Land Management, Nevada State Office, the Nevada Division of Forestry, and the U.S. Forest Service Humboldt-Tiobi in cooperation with University of Nevada, Reno Extension. Again, I'm the manager. I am going to be your host today. And so just before we get started, I wanted to remind folks that this recording will be made available in a few weeks to a month to all attendees. We have to make this ADA accessible before we send it out, and it takes some time to do that. I am going to just give you an idea of what our agenda is. I'm going to review some housekeeping items, then we'll do some anonymous pre-workshop polls. And then we are going to get into the speakers, and then we'll do some post-workshop polls and the Q&A. Okay, so this is the screen that you see. We're just asking folks to please mute yourselves. If you notice that somebody muted you, us as hosts, we have the ability to do so. We are asking folks to just turn off your video. It helps with streaming purposes. If you have any questions, again, the questions are going to be saved for the end, but you would just click on the questions, and then you arrow down to questions for speakers. We have Megan Kay, our outreach coordinator. She is out there as questions for speakers. And she is going to take your questions and then email them to me, and then I will ask them during the question and answer period. Okay, this is the gallery view. It lets you see a thumbnail display of participants in a grid-like pattern, or you can choose the speaker view, which allows you to only see the speaker. And of course, this is where you leave the workshop. Now, if I was in person, we would have this poster up, but we're in a virtual format. So I just want to let you know that extension programs are federally funded. Our programs are open to everyone, and there's a USDA contact. If you would like, you can always email us at lwf@unr.edu. And then we are going to do a demographics poll. This just lets us know who is attending our workshops. This is anonymous. You don't have to answer it, but it does help us with reporting and ensuring that we are reaching proper audiences. It also helps us with funding because we're federally funded. So if you could just fill out this demographics portion, it would be greatly appreciated. Again, it is anonymous. So I'm just going to leave a few minutes, leave this poll up for a few minutes. Looks like it's still populating. I think every time I think that we're done, another vote comes in, so maybe another 30 seconds. This is awesome. Okay, we had about 82% of the attendees participate. Thank you. So I'm going to end that poll. And then we're going to do a pre-workshop poll as well. And so this pre-workshop poll just assesses who we have in our audience, where you live, what your affiliation is. It lets us know your knowledge base, what you know about this topic, if you've experienced any of this. It will be anonymous, but I will show the results. It won't have your name attached to it. It'll just say this percentage said this percentage said that. Okay, it looks like people are still loading. We got a good amount of Nevadans attending. Someone from Washington? And for those of you that just are entering this, we have a pre-workshop poll up. We're just asking folks to fill this out. It is anonymous, but I will be showing the results. It just lets us know where you are from, and what your knowledge base is. So a few more are voting. Still gotta have this up. Okay, I think folks have stopped voting. I don't see the numbers moving. I'll end this poll and I'll share the results. Okay, it looks like 68% of the attendees are from Nevada, 29% California. We have somebody from Washington. Welcome. Affiliation, 25% of you are landowners, 11% homeowners. We have some renters, some folks from the academic arena. We have agency staff folks, land management folks, and others who classify themselves as other. So we asked the question, have you reseeded your property after wildfire? Majority of you have said, 75% have said no. Are you familiar with the steps? Reseeding, let's see, 36% of you said no. 32 said sort of, 32 said yes. Have you experienced flood after wildfire? 68% of you said no. 32% said yes. Do you know how to prepare for flood after wildfire? 36% said yes. 32% said no. 32% said sort of. You know what actions to take during a flood? 39% said yes. 39% said sort of. 21% said no. Do you know what to do after a flood? The majority being 43% said sort of. Okay, so thanks for filling that out. It just lets us know where you are, what you know. So I am going to introduce you to the first speaker. Her name is Anna Higgins. She is the Resource Management Officer. She's with the Nevada Division of Forestry, which is part of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We're really excited to have Anna on. She's an amazing partner, very knowledgeable. So join me in welcoming Anna.
Hello. Shall I share my screen, Jamie?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen.
All right.
Jimmy, your screen's still up. I think maybe.
Whoops, sorry about that.
All right. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Good.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm really happy to be invited into this little panel discussion. So yeah, let's just get started here. So I'm a forester in the Nevada Division of Forestry. I work on a lot of different types of post-fire restoration. I go out as a resource advisor while the fire is actively burning, and I advise the team that's managing the fire and try to do the rehab of the suppression damage, rehabbing dozer line, hazard trees, all that. I also work after the fire has been wrapped up. I work on the emergency restoration and stabilization. But today I'm going to talk about the fire restoration that you guys are all here to listen to. That is the seeding and planting that goes on typically up to 2 years post-fire. I work with a lot of great partners, Nevada Division of Forestry. We have oversight over private property in Nevada, as well as state lands. We work with county and city. I work with my federal partners a lot, the Forest Service, the BLM, their land, have a great partnership with NDOW, Nevada Department of Wildlife, NDOW. And then I have all the different fire protection districts that are just in my region, and I cover 9 counties in western northern Nevada. And then new partnership that we have as well with NV Energy and the SB 508 funds that were given to Nevada Division of Forestry. Had this partnership for a couple of years now with money that's been dedicated to wildfire prevention as well as wildfire restoration. And so I get calls from homeowners, landowners immediately after the fire burns asking, what can I do? And immediately post-fire, I can recommend that you just cut out anything that's been killed. It's usually pretty obvious, once you have some black sticks on the ground. Sometimes what's not so obvious are some trees that may look like they're still alive and you're not sure if they're going to die or not. So I'm happy to come out or ask another forester at Nevada Division of Forestry that's in your area. We can come out and give you some assessments of the health of your trees. So, like I said, sometimes it's very obvious if there's if the tree's completely burned up, it is good to cut it out and remove that material offsite, as fire killed and fire weakened trees do attract different bark beetles, and you don't want those bark beetles leaving those trees and attacking some of your live and healthy ones following the fire. So the picture on the bottom left is aspen that burned in the rock farm fire last year, and you can see these are some suckers that came up pretty quickly following the fire. And so you can cut out all that dead overstory of the aspen, remove that material so it doesn't become a fuel fire hazard in the future, and you'll get a healthy aspen forest coming in the background. And then on the right, this was the Tamarack Fire that just happened recently, and just showing kind of the edge of the burn. These pinyon pines, they're not very resistant to fire. And so any kind of fire damage on the bottom, you might still have a green pinyon pine that looks healthy, but if the bark got fire damage, it might not make it. But you can see here some unburned areas that can provide some seeding and some plant material to the burned area right adjacent to it. And then when I say to minimize soil disturbance, sometimes a lot of people want to go in and really clear out their property, try to remove all that burn material. If you're disturbing the soil, you're potentially losing those seeds that are in the seed bank that are in the soil that didn't burn up, that are some good native seeds that might repopulate the area. And also if you disturb the soil, you're just asking for some cheatgrass invasion, for weeds coming in. So just trying to minimize soil disturbance when you're going about and cleaning up your property after the fire. And then riparian areas, these are creek areas. They typically heal themselves, so we don't really focus a lot of our restoration efforts on riparian areas. This was a creek in the Perry fire that burned in 2016. The photo on the bottom left, that was taken just a couple of weeks after the fire, and you can already see some of the green grasses, some of the shrubs sprouting. On the right is what we don't want homeowners to do, a homeowner took upon themselves to make the creek better in their mind, I guess, by blading through it. Creeks should not be straight channels, they should naturally meander. And if you're putting a blade into a creek, you're disturbing that natural regeneration that's already occurring. So you can see there's some burned trees up on the banks. It's okay to cut those out. Again, if there's certain species that are these riparian species that sprout, they'll come back at the base. So don't disturb the root wad, leave it intact, but you can definitely remove that burnt material and take it off site. Some considerations in terms of if you have some weeds pre-fire, Nevada is notorious for our cheatgrass. If you had cheatgrass monoculture after the fire, is a really good time to try to revert that back to some native vegetation. This is actually Medusa head in the Pine Haven fire, and Medusa head's kind of notorious for treating with herbicides because it develops this thick thatch layer. So once it burns through, you kind of have this window of opportunity to try to treat these weed patches with some herbicides, and then hopefully come back in and try to get some native vegetation back in there. And so Our cheatgrass, it's a winter annual. It grows once we get our winter moisture. And so we recommend putting a pre-emergent down in the fall, the late fall, early winter before the cheatgrass germinates. And a pre-emergent herbicide prevents the seeds from germinating in the soil bank. Another thing I like to talk about with landowners is what's going to come back naturally post-fire. And it really depends on what was there previous, what was there before the fire, how hot the fire burned, what kind of disturbance happened after the fire. And so this is a picture of the Pine Haven fire that burned last winter in Reno. And in the foreground, the unburned vegetation, that is from that is part of the Collin fire burned scar that happened back in, I believe, 2011. So the vegetation is about 10 years post-fire, and you can tell it wasn't a very hot burn in that foreground of that 10-year-old fire because we still have some live pines. Some of the sprouting species came back, some of the sprouting shrubs. There's a lot of really good native grasses, buckwheats, shrubs. So to me, if I saw a burn that went through an area like this that had recovered, then I'm going to feel okay with it naturally coming back on its own. Whereas some areas just aren't going to naturally come back very well. They need a little help from us, either seeding or planting. And so talking to some professionals, you can get recommendations on that, as well as, like I said, how healthy was your landscape before the fire? And so in Nevada, we do have a lot of sprouting species that come back naturally after fire. This is the Little Valley fire scar. And a lot of these green shrubs, this photo is taken about 2 years post-fire. And so tobacco brush and the manzanita sprouts very vigorously post-fire. And so if you had a shrub field with these sprouting species, you don't really need to do much because they're going to come back on their own. And so rabbit brush, desert peach, Mormon tea, bitter brush, I say that it depends on where it is. So down in the valleys, down like Carson Valley, Washoe Valley, bitter brush doesn't sprout following fire, but some of our wetter areas, higher elevations up by Tahoe, even the Red Rock area, the bitter brush does sprout. So it kind of depends on where it's located. But again, like I said, the riparian species, the willow, bitter cherry, choke cherry, those riparian trees, the aspen cottonwoods, we have a lot of sprouting species. So feel free, again, remove that dead material if you don't want it to be a fire hazard in the future, but making sure you're not disturbing that root wad. And then if you do decide to seed post-fire, there's different methods of seeding. The one that's most accessible to homeowners is the broadcast seed method. The bottom left, you just have a belly grinder, go out there, fill up that belly grinder with a seed mix, have a rake, lightly rake it into the soil. We do at NDF, we use a lot of times a UTV at the bottom right photo, just have a little seed spreader on the back of that, and then harrow is a little chain that we drive behind it, just trying to get that seed contact with the soil. Drill seed, that upper left, if you have flat ground that's not rocky, in a tractor, we do have a seed drill. And that's typically the most successful germination rates you get because you can make sure the depth is right depending on what seed you're putting in there. And so getting that accurate is a great way to get some good germination. And then with our huge, large fires we have across Nevada, very steep, rocky terrain, aerial seed we're able to use to get some very large acres seeded. You know, of course, the cost is a little bit more expensive than all the other methods. And then the rates, typically for manual, we recommend about 10 to 15 pounds per acre. I usually go about 10 pounds. I worked with the Forest Service developing a seed mix for the Tamarack Fire, and they were recommending 15 pounds. So each agency is a little different on our recommendations in terms of our rates and also our species that we recommend. And drill seeding, again, like I said, since you're getting that good contact with the soil at the right depths, you don't need as much seed per acre. So, I mean, the treatment's pretty important. So late fall, early winter is when you want to get the seeding out there. Also do that pre-emergent herbicide if you're trying to control cheatgrass. Willow staking, I haven't talked about that. If you do have some creek areas that burned really hot, willow staking is a really cheap method of restoring. You can cut some green willow from an adjacent area and you just stick it right in the ground in the winter time and they root and sprout from there. Spring, once the snow melts before the soils dry out too much, you can do some planting of seedlings. And then if you do put that pre-emergent on right after the fire, then you'll want to wait a year after that pre-emergent, and then you can seed with the native seeds after that to try to get that switch over from, if you have a cheatgrass monoculture, to trying to get some native vegetation back. And just some considerations, I typically like to wait till after we have our first rains in the fall before I put the seed in pre-emergent, just because, as many of you are aware, we just have such hot and dry summers. I don't like to put the seed out or the chemicals out when it's still hot and dry. So I like to wait till we have our initial storm, but if I know a big snowstorm's coming, I'll try to get that material out on the ground. And then again, you don't want to be planting your seedlings when the soil's really cold. And so you want to kind of wait till we have some good temperatures, either in the fall or the spring, to allow some roots to get established. We do have a really hard time with planting success because we have such hot, dry summers, and we've had some pretty drought winters. So if you are able to irrigate, at least for the first year or two on your seedlings to get them established, that will make your seedling plantings a lot more successful. And then I mentioned different agencies have different recommendations for what we put back on the ground following fire. We do typically put some native grasses out there: sandbergs, bluegrass, squirrel-tail bottlebrush, Indian rice grass. Great Basin wild rye likes little wetter sites. There are a lot of other native grasses out in Nevada. These are just kind of our typical ones that we put in our mixes just because they've proven successful in the past. We do at NDF recommend non-native grasses. We typically put Siberian wheatgrass. There's a lot of different types of wheatgrasses out there. Different agencies use different types of wheatgrass. The reason why we put non-native out there is because of cheatgrass. And the wheatgrass really competes well with the cheatgrass. It also stays greener longer than the cheatgrass. So in some of these areas that reburn pretty frequently, we can have these early season fires in June because they're fueled by the cheatgrass. But if we have a wheatgrass in there, those areas might not burn until August or September. And so we're trying to reduce the fire season by having this non-native grass in there that stays greener a little longer. And also when we have these really drought years, sometimes our native grasses won't germinate if we put these out in the seed mix. And so having the non-native in there, we kind of hedge our bets and try to get at least something to germinate so it doesn't all become a cheatgrass monoculture following these fires. Again, we got to love our pollinator species. So I like to add some kind of flowers into a mix. Flax and yarrow are very successful. They have really good germination rates. Just some of our other natives in there, I really like to mix. It depends on our seed market and what's available that year. That these wildflower seed collections, they don't have as much seed as, say, some of the wheat grasses or the grasses that they're able to grow more production. So it just kind of depends on the year and what's available in the seed market. And then a lot of people like to put their native shrubs in the seed mixes as well. I know some people would probably laugh about trying to put rabbit brush out on the landscape post-fire. I know some people wage war with rabbit brush, but it is a good initial plant to get out there post-disturbance. It does really well. And we also recommend putting non-native shrubs in there. I don't know if Mark's going to talk a little bit about this with the NDOW, but forest kochia is a non-native shrub that we add to our mixes just because it is very successful in its germination rates, and it establishes quickly and provides good cover for wildlife, and also prevents erosion and competes with the cheatgrass as well. And then I mentioned earlier, we do have a hard time with our droughts with getting seedlings to successfully grow after we plant them, but we do recommend, depending on where you live, seedlings, usually it's better to put seedlings in the ground to get bigger plants. Obviously, putting just seed out takes a while to get things to establish. So we do recommend planting as well. And if you are looking to purchase seed, if you have a very large acre with these really large fires, or if you have a lot of ranchers that can get together, you can purchase seed through the NDF seed bank. If you're looking to just purchase for your own little individual parcel, I recommend Comstock Seed down in Gardnerville. They put together really great mixes and have a really diverse list of seed available. And then we do have our NDF Washoe State Nursery that you can purchase native and non-native, everything: grasses, flowers, shrubs, trees, things that are adapted to grow in our climate. So they're not open during the winter, but you can always check on their website and you can always contact them. There are people there year round, but I recommend checking that out as well. And then, like I said, you can talk to Nevada Division of Forestry, talk to Comstock Seed, the nursery, get recommendations of what to seed or plant back on your property. I typically, when I talk to a homeowner before I go out and look at their site, I'll go and look up the soils that are on their property. And from their soils, I can see what's supposed to grow on the site. Sometimes it's very obvious. Sometimes after a fire, it's a little less obvious what was there previous, depending on how bad the fire burned. But a lot of different options for people. And I look forward to answering questions at the end of this. So feel free to email me with any questions. I'm happy to go out and visit anyone's property, any property that's burned. And then also I do have my counterparts out in Elko and Las Vegas, if you're in different areas of Nevada, that can go and visit your property as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Great work and great knowledge. Anna actually allowed me to attend an aerial seeding. There was an NDF helicopter and it was incredible. Those pictures that she had don't do the work out there justice. So great work. Okay, let's go on to our second speaker. This is Mark Freese. He is the habitat biologist with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. Welcome, Mark.
All right, thank you. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah, we see your notes. Oh, perfect.
Okay, very good. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Freese. I'm a habitat biologist with the Nevada Department of Wildlife, here to talk about fire rehabilitation. Just hopefully through this presentation, you'll get a sense of what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And like Anna mentioned, she does a lot of work, really good partner in kind of that urban interface zone. We tend to focus a little more in the wildlands where wildlife habitat values are a little bit higher. The background you see here is actually draw fire that occurred in 2017 in the Clan Alpine Range. See, the right-hand side burned, the left-hand side of the road did not burn. On the right-hand side, it's mostly dominated by cheatgrass, an invasive annual grass that's throughout much of Nevada. No treatments occurred here, and kind of I see this as, you know, a missed opportunity for all of us, with some severe consequences for wildlife, for recreationists, for livestock grazers, for all in Nevada. And so with that, I'll just start the presentation. So Nevada Department of Wildlife, our mission is to protect, conserve, manage, and restore wildlife and its habitat for the aesthetic, scientific, educational, recreational, and economic benefits to the citizens of Nevada and the U.S. And really, it's the habitat, hawk and fire rehabilitation where we focus our efforts. We're organized into 7 different divisions. I'm in the habitat division, and we do numerous things within the habitat division, but fire rehab really falls under our habitat improvement projects program. Really, it's a necessity and fundamental aspect for having a diversity of healthy wildlife populations that we all cherish, is having a diversity of healthy habitat. Really, we cannot have broad diversity, vigorous, and healthy wildlife without healthy, sustainable habitats. So just a roadmap for the presentation, just go over a little bit of the fire problem in the Great Basin, NDOW's roles, approach, and accomplishments, and go over a few project examples. But before moving on, just a situation. Nevada's been very blessed this year by not having much acreage burned. You can see we've had 543 fires burning about 134,000 acres, which is a really low and mild fire, likely due to drought the past couple of years. We haven't built up the fuel base to carry fires.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
You know, you keep cutting in and out. I can barely hear you at sometimes, and other times your voice is getting louder. Is there any way you can get closer to speaker, or?
I'll speak up a little bit and see if that helps.
Okay, thanks.
Let me know if it doesn't.
Yeah, hey Mark, this is Megan. Do you have any headphones? Sorry, I know that might take up some time, but I think what's
I-
happening is there's a noise canceling function that Zoom has, and there's some background noise that it's trying to cancel out, but it's canceling you instead.
Huh.
If you don't have any, that's fine. We can try to get closer to the microphone. I just was wondering.
Yeah, I'll move the computer closer and speak a little louder, and hopefully that helps.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so Nevada's been blessed this year by having few fires, but it's fire years like this where we're able to go back and restore past burns and past large acreages. So like an example this year, we started spraying chemical to kill cheatgrass on about 32,000 acres is what we're expecting to do this fall, combined with probably another 30,000 acres of seeding. But as we all are aware, living in California, Nevada, California certainly experienced a significant fire year. Just locally, we've had the Dixie, Caldor, Beckworth, the Tamarack burning over 1.3 million acres this year, which has implications for Nevada's wildlife as well. Wildlife don't understand the political boundaries, and they do move between California and Nevada. And there's definitely a need for them to fulfill their life cycles by utilizing habitats in each state. Oops. So just the fire problem, I imagine most of the audience is aware. We've been increasing the frequency and size of fires across the West. You can see the graphic in the lower left-hand quarter from 1980 to 99, 4.2 million acres burned, and from 2000 to 2018, 9.5 million. Almost doubled the rate in the last 20 years. Really, the problem stems from invasive species or in combination with invasive species, such as cheatgrass across the Great Basin. The scale and magnitude of wildfire and invasives is our greatest threat to Nevada's wildlife. And the projections are expected to increase both in terms of wildfire and invasive species in the combination. You can see the graph on the right in 1988, the extent of annual grass cover has changed drastically over the past 40 years. We have a lot more invasive annual grasses, which carry fires and increase this fire cycle. And really, there's a growing gap between the capacity and infrastructure. And with our capacity infrastructure remaining largely stable, but the increase in fire acreage is ever expanding. So there's really a need and an opportunity to strategically leverage resources between agencies, landowners, partners, to maximize our efficiencies and productivity. At the same time, to try and grow our fire rehab programs with diversified approaches, increased partnerships, and increased funding. So our approach, we're largely opportunistic. We fill a lot of gaps. We partner, rely on partnerships with private landowners, with public agencies to leverage our resources and fill these gaps. We're very nimble and flexible as an agency. That's really one of our strengths. But one of our limitations is in personnel and funding. For example, in Western region, we don't even have one full-time equivalent position for rehabilitation efforts, but we do what we can. We're kind of a scrappy bunch. So we prioritize our work where high wildlife values intersect, where the magnitude of uplift from those treatments is high. Really what we're attempting to do is give vegetation communities a nudge in the right direction with some active management where needed, and then let passive management take over. We attempt to select the right seed or chemical appropriate for the site with the highest likelihood of success using the best methods and at the right time, such as Anna touched on. And we'll treat multiple times using multiple methods if necessary. Certainly there's constraints that exist ecologically in the Great Basin. We're limited by precipitation. There's different temperature regimes, different slopes, rockiness really control what you can do. There's also permitting constraints. So when we're operating on public lands, which the majority of Nevada is public land, we have to go through NEPA and get cultural clearances, and there's special designations that we have to work around. So there's quite a bit of constraints there. And then just the logistical constraints of the amount of seed that's available in the market, contractor availability, etc. So a wildfire occurs, then what? What we're trying to do is help direct plant succession, and plant succession's going to be controlled post-fire by numerous factors. You know, what is the current vegetation community? What's its capability? What's the post-fire weather? What's its disturbance history? And what's the fire severity? And so we'll take an initial shot, do a desktop assessment, look at ecological site descriptions, disturbance response groups, past fire history. We'll look at resistance resilience models, cheatgrass models, use the land treatment exploration tool, look at burn severity maps, terrain constraints, and we'll start to put that together in a plan. And then we'll visit the field to validate that plan. We'll look at the burn severity. We'll look at unburned patches, what the community looked like before. We'll kick the grasses, and if they are hard, they're probably going to survive. If they slough off, they're probably dead. We'll get an assessment of what we expect to be left on site. We'll look at the cheatgrass seed bank. You see those cups at the bottom. This is a seed bioassay from the Tamarack Fire, and you can see most of those don't have very much cheatgrass, if any. That's a good sign if we want to go in and seed. However, the cups on the right has a high density of cheatgrass, and that's going to help us determine what treatment should happen. The cups on the right, that site, we should be using a pre-emergent herbicide to eliminate that cheatgrass seed bank. And so that when we seed, we're seeding into a site that that's free of cheatgrass competition, give our seedlings the best chance of success. So between the desktop assessment and field assessment, we'll develop recommendations, include those in any Forest Service, BLM plans, work with private landowners, and then we're prioritizing efforts consistently through the summer, fall on a statewide basis, and directing our dollars to the most meaningful areas. Then it comes to implementation. We're ordering seed, we're contacting vendors, we're going out with the vendors and making sure the treatments are implemented according to our scopes of work. And then we'll do post-fire monitoring. So what do? Over the past 4 years, we've ramped up our program. You can see we've aerial seeded almost 300,000 acres over this 4-year period, drill seed about 12,000, applied herbicide over 120,000 acres, and for a total of about 420,000 acres of treatments. We largely defer our treatments and work around where BLM, Forest Service aren't able to get to, or private landowners, and try and fill those gaps. In doing so, we've spent about $8.3 million the past 4 years. Our funding's very diverse. We have about 25 different pots of funding. We get federal grant dollars through Pittman-Robertson excise taxes on ammo and hunting equipment. We use state generated dollars from hunting and fishing license tags and fees. We use partner dollars such as BLM partner agreements. And we seek out other funding like Dream Tech funding. And we also rely heavily on local NGOs, sportsmen's organizations such as Nevada Bighorns Unlimited, Nevada Muleys, Nevada Chucker Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and Carson Valley Chucker Club to help us get our treatments implemented. So here's just a picture similar to one Anna had. We've got sagebrush and bitterbrush seedlings. We've got a seed truck, lower left-hand corner. We've got a helicopter aerial seeding project in the center, rangeland drill in the top right, and then flying chemical on the Poodle Fire in the lower right, just for visual of what some of these treatments look like. So now I'll transition and go over a few examples. The Martin Fire burned in 2018. It burned 435,000 acres in 5 days. BLM did a significant amount of treatments. And so we largely tried filling gaps that they couldn't get to or augmenting their seed mixes with seed. But on the West Martin, just the west half of the Martin Fire, NDOW was able to implement 59,000 acres of treatment. One kind of successful anecdotal story, BLM was furloughed in December through February that year when implementation should have been happening. So they gave us 18,000 acres worth of seed, which NDOW contracted and got on that winter. That's just an example of one of those successful partnerships, why partnerships add durability of project. Over the next 2 years, we've got another 10,000 acres lined up of treatments in partnership with BLM. So an example of some of the treatments on Martin Fire, upper left-hand corner is chemical herbicide treatment. You can see left-hand side of the photo is sprayed, the right hand wasn't, and you can see the cheatgrass coming in 1 year post-fire. Left-hand side enables us that opportunity to get seed on site, free of cheatgrass competition to give us the best odds of success. We did a sagebrush strip seeding. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner, all those sagebrush plants. That was largely attributed to our ability to get planes in the air and fly sagebrush strips across that large area. These strips will act as seed islands, and they'll start to fill in over time by having that seed source. Lower left-hand corner is a picture of an aerial seeding. Bottom middle photo is a drill seeding, and then the lower right-hand photo is not strategic non-native seeding in an area that had a high likelihood of cheatgrass, high likelihood of future burns, and really a low resistant and resilient site. Looks like I'm missing a picture there. Here we go. So this is an example of a aerial herbicide treatment. So you can see on the left-hand side, it was sprayed. On the right, it was not sprayed. Standing in that same location, you can see on the left-hand side what it looks like if you pan left, and on the right, what it looks like to the right. So very effective treatment at removing that cheatgrass competition. That enables us to come back and seed successfully. There's a bunch of sagebrush and some grasses and yarrow. Basically, by spraying, fallowing for a year, and then seeding the following fall, we're able to have a successful seeding even on drier years when it's free of cheatgrass competition. Cheatgrass is excellent at robbing the resources on site and taking those away from our desirable species, and will win in a seed competition every time with our natives. So it's really important to remove that cheatgrass competition. Here's another example of successful seeding, non-native seeding. On the left, you can see 1 year post-fire, we had quite a bit of successful kochia seeded on site, as well as some Siberian wheatgrass, a very dry site. We had quite a bit of cheatgrass competition, and so we decided to spray it after successfully seeded. And the picture on the right's what it looked like this year after successful seeding and spraying. This site's going to function for wildlife values, both in terms of forage and cover. This is an area that mule deer migrate through. We get some elk and bighorn sheep use as well. So it's going to provide the forage quality to carry those animals through the winter, as well as reduce the likelihood of future fire starts. Here's an example of seeding. This was the aerial broadcast seeding, which is the picture on the right, compared to an area that had no treatment on the left. You can see we got a lot of really good deep-rooted perennial bunch grasses recruited on site through the seeding effort. It's staying green long into the growing season. And it's going to be able to suppress cheatgrass from coming back. So it's a much more resilient and resistant site. Okay, poodle fire. NDOW sprayed about 8,000 acres of the poodle fire with imazepyc last fall. The fire occurred in August, which is a tricky time for BLM to be able to get contracts administered as their financial books are closing. So we were able to step in, contract, and get that 8,000 acre chunk sprayed. And this year we're working with BLM to seed about 6,700 acres of that this fall. A couple pictures of poodle fire. The picture on the left, you can see where herbicide was sprayed. On the right hand side of that same photo, you can see active cheatgrass growth. So we're going to have a lot more success seeding into that area on the left hand side, free of cheatgrass competition. That herbicide also is very effective at suppressing your annuals while allowing your perennials the necessary resources to bounce back. And so the picture on the right is just an example of that. We got a really good release of perennial forbs and perennial grasses on site. This is the same photo, just 2 years apart. You can see active cheatgrass growth from that year, last year, which we sprayed. And then on the right-hand side is the dead material. So this is going to allow us that opportunity to get seed established on site, free of competition, give us the best odds of success for seeding. And then last picture of the Poodle Fire, you can see the site on the left. Certainly there's limited vegetation on site. You know, that's kind of an indicator that we do need to seed in that herbicide sprayed area. The site on the, or picture on the right was also sprayed. It removed the cheatgrass that was on site and really gave those resources to the perennial vegetation that's established on site. And that's a healthy functioning perennial vegetation stand that doesn't need seeded. Draw Fire, we seeded about 1,600 acres in the Clan Alpine Mountains in 2017. Just a couple quick pictures. 1 year post-fire, you could see really good establishment of perennial vegetation in 2 years post-fire. This site burned hot in pinyon juniper trees. It gives us that window of opportunity. Generally, it sterilizes and kills the seed bank in these hot PJ burns, and it gives you that opportunity to get seed established on site while you're free of cheatgrass competition. However, if you wait a year, then you end up getting cheatgrass on site. So the picture on the left is 1 year post-fire. You can see there was some openings or vacant or opportunities to get seed on site. However, the site wasn't seeded. And you can see that by the second year, cheatgrass has filled all those niches. So that's really a missed opportunity. Povale Fire burned in 2020. We seeded about 1,000 acres. Due to the dry year we had last year, the seeding was largely unsuccessful. There's still an opportunity. We're not calling it a failure yet, as we've seen in our experience, seeding success occur year 2 or year 3 down the line. So we're still hopeful we'll get some success, but certainly it's disappointing to have a drought year post-seeding. But just a few pictures from the Povale Fire. As expected, the south aspects, the picture on the left, came back with a fair amount of cheatgrass and other weeds, and north aspects really responded pretty positively on their own. And then this is a picture of a mahogany stand that burnt that we seeded. You could see between last year, the picture on the left, and this year's picture on the right, the site's still largely vacant. But like I said, we're hopeful that some of that seed's still on site, carried over into the seed bank, and with some decent precip, we might have a positive outcome yet. So just some final thoughts. Fire and invasives are an ever increasing issue for wildlife in Nevadans. Really, you know, we're trying to get the right seed or chemical at the right time using the right method on site to direct that vegetation community in a desired direction. We have multiple treatments options, and sometimes it takes multiple treatments over numerous years to have a successful project. We also should be thinking about, you know, preventative treatments, green strips, fuel breaks, those sort of things. And we do coordinate and work closely with partners on those to try and strategically locate some of those in areas at risk of burning. And then certainly want to continue increasing partnerships and leveraging resources. And then doing nothing is often not a good option in the Great Basin. With that, I'll defer any questions till the end of the presentations. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Really interesting stuff. Great work. Cheatgrass is as terrible as we all know it. Megan had posted in the chat a link to information about pre-emergence herbicide that Living with Fire did a blog on. If you want to learn more about that, it is in the chat. I think we'll probably include it in like the post workshop email as well. Okay, so I would like to introduce the next presenters. I'm going to be introducing Danae Olson. She is the project management specialist with the Army Corps of Engineers, and Elise Jarrett. Did I say your name right? Last name right?
Yep, you got it.
Good. Okay. She's a water resources planner, also with the Army Corps of Engineers. Welcome, ladies.
All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining us here today. Danae and I are excited to share with you this current project that is underway for the state of Nevada. And what we're working on is a Nevada flood after fire guide that's kind of been in the works for the past several months in conjunction with federal, state, and local agencies. And this effort falls underneath our Silver Jackets program, and the overarching focus is to help communities reduce their flood risk. And so for this specific effort, we focus specifically on creating a resource for the general public to help raise awareness and educate Nevadans on their flood risk, and then also to provide actionable steps that they can take to better prepare for a flood after fire. And so our presentation today just covers some of the material that is included in the guide. And then we just added a slide in here, just knowing we were going to be presenting remotely. And again, my name is Elise Jarrett, and I'm a water resources planner with the Sacramento District Corps of Engineers.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Danae Olson. I work with Elise in the Sacramento District Army Corps of Engineers in project management for the flood risk management program.
And for our presentation outline today, so first I want to just provide a quick overview on the flood after fire guide. And then I'll go in just to share a little bit about post-fire hazards, to share why there is an increased risk of flooding following a wildfire. And then Danae will discuss more on ways to be prepared, and then next steps for the project, and then where this document can be found once it is published. Next slide. So as many of you, I'm sure, know, when you go to do a quick search on Google, that you can receive back hundreds or thousands of results. But because there are so many resources available, this can sometimes be super overwhelming and confusing, and especially in a time of an emergency, that there isn't a lot of time to try to figure out what resources, are the most pertinent to find the information you need. And so recognizing this, our approach for creating this guide was to create a consolidated resource with that most important information to help individuals and communities understand the risks of flooding after a wildfire, and then to identify actionable steps that they can take to be better prepared. And so in terms of the content that we have provided in the guide, and we really, went through this kind of an iterative process to keep this as short as possible, because it's easy to, to get the document. There's a lot of great information, but we really wanted to keep this small so people can just use it, have it on hand, and have it really be like a functional working document in a time of need. And so we narrowed down the focus of this guide to the following content. 1, provide information on how to stay safe in a flood, how to prepare their properties, evacuation preparation and checklists, ways to stay informed, and this was through weather and safety apps and alerts, to provide information on post-wildfire hazards, and then lastly, to provide some information on available programs that individuals and communities can tap into to help with the recovery process. Next slide. And so for post-fire hazards, so just because the flames are gone doesn't mean that the risks are also gone. That there can be post-wildfire hazards that can persist for weeks, months, or even years following a wildfire. And so we just noted 5 of those here. So flash flooding, debris flows, rock falls, roadway erosion, and burned and distressed trees are 5 examples of post-fire hazards. But there are others out there for sure. And so we just wanted to, I guess, raise awareness on these 5 items to, I guess, explain that they can present themselves in a number of different forms. But for the contents of this guide, we're specifically focusing on the flood after fire component. And so we've really kind of honed in on the flash flooding and debris flows in terms of the hazards. But we did want to include this information just so that people are aware that there are hazards in a number of different, I guess, scenarios or places following a fire. Next slide. And so I guess, why is there a higher risk of flooding after a fire? And so the short answer to that is that the soil properties can change when under extreme heat for a period of time. And so under normal conditions, the soil is able to absorb water, which helps reduce runoff. But as the soil changes during a fire, a water repellent layer is created, which then loses the soil, or the soil then loses its absorption capabilities, which can create much more runoff than before. And so I guess the risk here and the increased risk is that when a storm comes through, that the water is no longer, or as much water is no longer seeping into the ground, being absorbed, but now much more of that is running downhill, which is posing an increased risk to downstream communities. And so this is a really great graphic here that we adopted from the National Weather Service, just showing how that changes from before a fire, during a fire, and after a fire. And then when a rainstorm comes through, kind of how that impacts or how it changes and the impacts it can lead to. Next slide. And so just a few things to know about flash flooding and debris flows. And this just really hits the surface, but the main points we wanted to hit on here was that it takes much less rainfall to result in flash flooding and debris flows, is for the reasons I just discussed in terms of the increased risk following a fire, and that communities miles downstream of a burned area can be severely impacted. And then also that thunderstorms can develop quickly over burned areas, which can produce the flash flooding flows nearly as fast as National Weather Service radar can detect them. So there's a very short warning window here. And so just trying to stress to people to better understand on ways they can be prepared, because there isn't a huge window of time to gather their belongings that they need in order to get to safety. And then for this graphic here, I think it does kind of a great job, and I was really surprised when I was looking, when I first saw this, but that it only takes about 6 inches of fast-moving water to carry away an adult, that it can take roughly 12 inches of fast-moving water to carry away a small car, and then just 18 to 24 inches of fast-moving water to carry away most large SUVs, vans, and trucks. And so I guess when you're looking over an area, it's like, oh, that's like not that much water, but if it's moving quickly, it's very dangerous. And so just trying to stress, turn around, don't drown, don't take that risk of trying to pass through moving water, because it can be very, very dangerous. Next slide.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Elise. So considering the post-wildfire hazards and why flood risk increases after a wildfire, and some of the things to know about flash flooding and debris flow, I guess the question is, how can you mitigate your flood risk? And so part of the guide, part of the Nevada Flood After Fire Guide, lists out very practical steps that you can take as a Nevada resident or a resident of other states as well. These are somewhat universal tips to make sure that you are best prepared should an event occur. So one of those items would be to make sure that you are insured for flooding. And just keeping in mind that there's normally a 30-day waiting period before the policies become active. So being proactive about that and planning ahead of time is the way to go. And then additionally, staying updated with notifications and alerts. So being as best informed and as early as possible There are several applications and resources out there, kind of ever increasing amount of applications to stay informed. And 3 in particular that we've highlighted here are the Code Red, Reverse 911, and the American Red Cross Emergency app. And it's pretty exciting. In the Nevada Flood After Fire Guide, we actually have a page of QR codes for kind of easy, quick access to some of the resources that are out there. So additional ways to stay prepared. The guide also covers how to recognize flood risk, kind of how to know your community's warning signals, evacuation routes, and emergency shelters, and just noting how important that is to be aware of those things for your particular community. What to do during and after a flood, and just being better prepared and having an idea of kind of how to keep your family and your household as safe as possible. And something else you will find in the guide are a series of checklists. So checklists for to-go bag essentials, how to prepare family members, pets, and livestock, and how to prepare your property. So lots of ideas and great planning tools in there in the guide. And additionally, if you want to check out kind of these and a whole host of other great resources, we recommend going to the Living with Fire website. There are just a ton of resources on there, and it's a great place to explore some preparedness options. So as far as the Nevada Flood After Fire Guide, next steps, this guide, as Elise mentioned, is part of a larger project that is an interagency project. We have multiple partners, kind of all hands on deck working together to get this peer reviewed and make sure that we're keeping it short and sweet, but we're also considering the most relevant and latest information. And we are planning to publish, the goal is to publish the guide by the end of this year. And we're planning to house that on the Living with Fire website. And also we'll be distributing it as we can at outreach events when things return to in person or digitally if in the meantime. So just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for listening in today and listening about the guide. And just want to leave you saying that the hope is that this Nevada Flood After Fire Guide will be a useful, easily digestible resource for Nevada residents, and that through the content, residents will be better prepared for the risks associated with flooding after fire. So thank you so much for your time today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Elise or myself. And Jamie, I think you might be on mute. I can't hear you.
No, it's not working.
There you go.
Maybe on double mute. I saw it just came off your screen here. Yep, it just came off.
Can I try again? Yep. No, I can't. I don't know what's going on. Maybe try and unplugging your headphones and just going straight through this, through the speaker microphone. No. I can, do you want to sign in and sign back out? And I'll entertain people in this game. Okay, thank you to everyone who presented. I learned so much. I'm Megan Kidd, Outreach Coordinator. Also questions for speakers. Let me just remove Jamie's spotlight. There we go. You guys had some great questions. And I think that while we're waiting for Jamie to dive in, I'm gonna do some of the low-hanging fruit questions because she's a much better facilitator than I am. But let's go. Oh, Jonathan's like, do an intermission. I do want everyone to honor their needs. So if you guys need to get up and go to the bathroom or something, go for it. But I don't think we have time for an intermission because we want to be able to get to everyone's questions. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. We're going to start with questions about reseeding. Let's see. We have a three-part question, which we'll do in a second, but we'll start with, and this is for either Mark or Anna. How are the response strategies integrating a range of plausible and future climatic conditions associated with uncertainty? So basically what I think they're asking is, how are your strategies, how does climate change and sort of the uncertainty of climate and weather impact your strategies for reseeding? And then the second part of that question would be, many species are poorly adapted to future conditions. So how are you choosing which species to plant and where? So who would like to take that, Mark or Anna?
Yeah, I can start. At least on NDOW side, we certainly recognize, you know, the drying trends. And in those areas that are kind of at the thresholds, we may choose to use some drier adapted species, even though it's not meant for that ecological site, try and get ahead. But that's kind of the extent of what we're doing right now.
So just kind of being aware of which species are more adapted to like arid climates, and then
exactly. So there's several different like sagebrush seed zones, right? You want to get the seed that's most appropriate for that site. However, when you move towards the drier end of that spectrum, we may actually drop a seed zone below, you know, and so use a drier adapted species on that site, knowing that in the future it's going to be better adapted for that site, or a few dry years we're more likely to have some success.
Okay. This next question is kind of tied in with that, but I wanted to check in with Jamie real quick. How's your audio going? We can hear you, but it's still not great. I wonder what happened.
Can't hear me.
You kind of guard. Huh?
Is this better?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Okay. I don't know what question we just asked.
We just asked the response strategies for.
Okay.
And I was going to follow up with the second one in that group. So how about I ask the next one, and then you can kind of figure out which one you want to do next. Okay. So this one kind of falls in with that last question, and it's talking about what percentage of fails have cooperative weather such. Sorry, I'm not understanding how it's written. So, but I know what they're trying to say. So it's basically talking about how weather is variable, and you know, some seasons are wetter than others. So how does that factor into your strategy? And maybe Anna, you want to address that one? So for example, if we have a fire, but we don't necessarily have a lot of precipitation expected, how do you handle like the pre-emergence herbicide and also the reseeding?
Yeah, I guess, well, I don't have any experience of doing the pre-emergence and the seeding the same year. Yeah, we've just had such dry falls lately. I mean, we had that record year in 2016, but we didn't do any seeding or spraying that year. So yeah, I guess I just don't have any experience with that. I don't know, Mark, do you have any experience with that?
And then so I guess the second part of the question would be like, yeah, because you guys laid out the sequence that you guys like to do these the sequence of the spraying and then reseeding, but what happens if the weather doesn't cooperate?
Yeah, I guess this is Mark. Mother Nature doesn't cooperate a lot of the time, right? Well, usually 50–60% of the time we're below normal precip years. And so Anna talked about it, like including some species, even some introduced species, that allows you to hedge your beds on those drier years and have some success. That's a strategy to use. Also being able to, monitor and adaptively manage. So if you don't have success seeding, and a year or two after, continue monitoring, and maybe you need to come back and reseed. Those are all just the nature of the beast, if you will. Mother Nature kind of deals those hands, but we try and include the right seed mixes at the right times, using the right methods, everything within our control to give us the best odds of success. But Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate. And Poville fire was one example that we're going to have to go back and continue to monitor. And if our seed comes back this next year, great. If it doesn't, we may need to reseed. If cheatgrass comes on site, then maybe the more appropriate tool is a chemical treatment followed by a fallow and reseeding in future years.
Cool. So it's basically you have some sort of plan A, B, C, and then reassess and see what goes.
Yep.
Okay, so I think Jamie mentioned she had her volume to work, so I'm gonna pass it back to Jamie.
Okay, so Mark, did you want to add anything else to that, or you were just in agreement with Megan?
Yep, just in agreeing.
Okay. Okay, so I am going to put this question, I'm just going to put it into the chat, just so folks can read it. This is there's 3 parts to this question. I will put it in the chat, and then I will ask it to folks. Please provide some guidance to prevent or minimize these 3 post-fire seeding concerns. So the first concern is the seeded tropicals. Suppress native species which can have long-term adverse unintended consequences, such as an altered ecosystem. Not sure if I understand that question. Whoever asked that, would you like to clarify?
I think that was Cherise. So yeah, Cherise, if you want to go ahead and just hop on and unmute, go for it.
Yes, I have observed and read many studies where we have an automatic response of seeding because that's something that we feel empowered to do, and that it has suppressed the native plants, particularly tree species and shrubs, from coming in post-fire because they're competing with the species that were planted. And I've never really seen a satisfactory resolution of when is it appropriate to seed and when is it not, to allow native plant response to have a chance. The other questions are related to this as well, but that's generically what I'm saying. And so if you alter the structure and function of an ecosystem because you're planting plants that were not native or are more aggressive, it can have long-term consequences.
This is Anna from Nevada Division of Forestry. Yeah, it's a really tough conundrum. We have these non-native invasives that have altered our ecosystems and our fire regimes. And so trying to introduce other non-natives to then combat this, altered state that we already are seeing. It's a hard, not an easy thing to do, or come up with good solutions that are going to help everyone, because us putting non-natives out there is altering some sites. And so that's why we try to look at, like Mark said, we get out there and we do our field visits right after the fire to assess, you know, how healthy the area is, how well it will respond naturally. And then if we do see these areas where there's a lot of vegetation that's going to respond on its own, then we don't seed in those areas, and really looking at the areas that really need our help. And also just, I mean, the sheer size of the fires in Nevada, you know, we're not going to seed every acre that burns. And so, yes, we may be altering some sites with our seeding, but we're not going to be doing it on such a grand scale, just because these fires are so huge. You know, the portion of the fire that we're seeding is pretty small comparatively. But yeah, it's not an easy thing. I mean, we all question it, but you know, the sites have all been altered from cheatgrass and from, you know, the humans and grazing and, you know, all the different things that we've impacted these sites. So.
Good answer, Anna. Yeah, this is a tough conundrum. Oh, sorry, Mark, are you going to add to this too?
Yeah, I could just add a little bit. It certainly is a challenge. But like Anna said, I think when you go out, you make an assessment, you look at the risk, the value of that risk, right? And certainly if the site is going to have cheatgrass, then that's certainly not going to be good. If it's a really dry site, then we may choose to use some introduced species, which gives us a better odds of success. I mean, some of the literature has demonstrated we would love nothing more than to use native only. We really would, but in our experience, we've seen and observed greater success on these more arid sites. Now, at higher elevations, more resistant, more resilient, we will choose to use native only if seeding's necessary, but it's not necessary all the time either. And that's why it's really important to use all the tools in the toolbox, your desktop, your field visits, and really figure out what it is we're trying to accomplish. But in some cases, introduced species provides greater value in terms of wildlife, as well as range health, than doing nothing and allowing cheatgrass to come in and dominate.
This is Leanne from Progressive Rancher Magazine. Can you hear me, you guys? Jamie?
Yes.
The reason I'm interrupting is my chat does not work, and I do apologize. If there's a point where I can ask a question, what should I do so I'm not interrupting too much?
So if anybody has any problems with the chat, why don't you just email us at lwf@unr.edu, and then we can get that on here, and get that going. And if I don't receive any emails from you, Leanna, within the next couple minutes, then I'll call on you, okay?
Well, I have to jump off, you guys, and get on the home gardener class. It starts at 1. And what I'll do is I'll just go through Dean Bill Payne and get back to you guys and see what I can do about getting what you have put together printed in the magazine. I think it's very, very helpful to the ranchers. And thank you. Excellent program, but I'm going to have to leave you guys. And I think I've interviewed Mark Freese before, and he and I agree on quite a few things. So thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanna. Okay, so there's another question. Does any agency need volunteers to help to reseed the Tamarack and Caldor fire areas? I live in that area and I would love to help.
Yeah, this is Anna. Was that Marie that was asking that question? Marie Johnson?
Marie, yeah.
Yeah, Marie, if you want to just reach out to me, we're still kind of coordinating where we're going to be doing all the seeding and what methods we're going to be doing it. But and then there's potentially going to be some plantings as well. So if we don't need volunteers for the seeding, we might need volunteers for the plantings. So Marie, I don't know if you saw my email address, I'll put it in the chat. And so if people are interested, they can contact me and I'll get back to them.
Thanks, Anna. Let's see. This individual says, I Suspect that my trees have been damaged in a fire. Should I water as usual until I can have someone come and assess the trees?
Sorry, I was just typing there. Yeah, this is Anna. Yes, I would just water as usual. I wouldn't overwater, but what you've already been watering them. And then, yeah, I'd get someone to come out and assess them, what the damage to the bark is, to the roots. And it's not always 100% certain which trees are going to make it and which trees are going to die with the fire, but at least we can give you some recommendations and some probabilities.
Thanks, Anna. Let's see. There's another question. As land continues to be treated over time, what's the likelihood that the battle with cheatgrass will eventually stabilize? Or do you anticipate the need to use herbicide and reseed forever?
This is Mark. That's a really good question. You know, just shooting from the hip, I expect cheatgrass to be around through my lifetime, through my kids' lifetime. I expect we'll need to keep after the cheatgrass, the invasive annual issue for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, unfortunately, cheatgrass is a big problem. I just keep at it. Okay, another question. We have been watching the St. James Wildfire as preferred species have sprouted under solid cover of mustard. We think the perennials will win out in a few years. A few failed areas included soils that had heavy herbaceous growth, dormant that slowed the fire, so the soils looked cooked. Whereas in the rocky sites, the fire moved through fast and germinating species did better.
Sorry, Jamie, that was more of a comment from Ed Kleiner, who runs the Comstock seed. So I think he was just trying to let folks know what he's observed about those seeds.
I see. I thought the following questions were related. Another question is, are species mixes for green strips different? Whoever asked that, would you like to clarify what you're asking?
This is Anna. I was wondering if they were just asking about our typical seed mix versus the green strip. The green strip, I think Mark put a link to some research article about different green strip mixes. Typically, either just a single grass species or a mixture of forage kochia and wheatgrass is kind of predominantly used. Something that just stays green longer than cheatgrass or some of our other native seeds out there.
Thanks, Anna. How is commercial grazing managed post-fire after treatments have occurred to improve wildlife habitat? Grazing can reverse the recovery process. So how is that impact mitigated? I'll put this in the chat if you want to read it.
Yeah, this is Mark. Generally, there are seasonal closures post-fire when seeding occurs. Generally, it's waiting until after the second growing season, after those seedlings have established. And so they do defer grazing as much as possible on a seeding to enable it to establish.
Okay. Another question. I have a timber planting grant with CAL FIRE. I'm planning to remove brush, mainly manzanita, to reduce competition with ponderosa. Yet a fire took out more than 95% of my trees. And so having some shade from brush to reduce evaporation on my dry, sandy area, Delaney soil. How is planting of grasses helpful versus brush? Rabbit brush, antelope ritter brush, cherry, currant, manzanita. I'll put this question in the chat so you can see.
Yeah, this is Anna. I know that it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I think that grass outcompetes trees more than shrubs. I guess it depends on the cover of the grass. And then shrubs outcompete trees as well. So, but then you do need some shade because we have seen in some areas where we have a pretty severe fire, it becomes, the soil and the site becomes so hot that it can't actually allow trees to grow there anymore. So we actually see some areas convert from forest land to shrubland. So I guess, yeah, I would recommend more probably the brush to provide that shade, but then maybe a little bit of grass. But I do believe the grasses are a little bit more competitive with the tree seedlings than the brushes.
I see a question in the chat from Sandra. Is Elise still around, or are you going to be leaving? Can we ask you now?
Danae's still here.
Okay, I'll ask this question.
Me too.
A number of slides on flood prep and what constitutes a dangerous situation would work out very well for bulletin boards in the 2 counties I work with. Terrific public information. Can I get copies that would work as laminated pieces of info? Actually, this is probably a question for me. She wants to know if she can use some of this stuff. Yeah, Sandy, you can. You would just need to credit it with extension, or sorry, with the Living the Fire program and any other partners that we've worked on with this. It is in peer review, so I don't know if things will be changed, but just email me, Sandy, and we can work on that.
And Jamie, I'll add to that too. So kind of the larger part of this project, the Silver Jackets project, entails a few more deliverables that we're hoping to put together. So actually one of the items that we're prioritizing is putting together some updated flood after fire outreach materials. So yeah, things like flyers or brochures, probably with more of a digital twist, but also for bulletin boards. Sure, if that's something that we can use, that's great. So if you want to reach out to Lisa and I with your contact information, we can definitely loop you into what we've been working on.
Awesome. I don't know. I haven't really been keeping up with the chat, so I don't know if I missed any other questions. Megan, are there any other questions?
I think you got to all of them.
Oh, there's one from Dale. Can the speakers talk on chemical for cheatgrass? Who can get and use for private homeowners?
This is Mark. I don't know that I'm the best one to speak to it, but we primarily use imazapic is the chemical. And there's panoramic, plateau are the labeled names. I believe you will be able to get those in small quantities. Another one you should definitely look into is Rejuvra. Rejuvra is a newer pre-emergent herbicide that has a longer duration. So if you're trying to take care of cheatgrass for 4 or 5 years, you can do that. It's not approved on federal lands yet, and that's why we're not using it yet.
I think that is it for questions, unless you have any more, Megan.
Nope, I think we got to them all.
So I just want to say thank you so much to the speakers. This has been much needed, incredible information, great work out there. I have really enjoyed this presentation. Wait, there's one more question. Are any of your agencies looking at biochar from burned materials from the site as a soil amendment and long-term carbon sequestration?
And then maybe we should launch the poll while they answer that.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's all right. Yeah, this is Anna. So yeah, we have looked at biochar. I know someone recently asked us about going out and collecting from areas that have burned recently. We didn't think that would really be feasible, as there's just not a lot of char left on the landscape. that, you know, but we have worked with creating biochar, like burning down when we're doing some PJ thinnings removal. We've created biochar, and we worked with a composter and the university to look at some soil amendments. But as far as like collecting that from the wildfires, I don't know if anyone that is, but are people that are working on. We just haven't ramped it up in production or anything ourselves. So I don't know if anyone else is kind of creating these larger scale biochar operations. We just kind of did a small trial to see how it worked.
Thanks, Anna. So if folks can please fill out the post-workshop questions, it really helps us to evaluate our programs. Was it worth attending? What you learned? If you plan on implementing any of this. As a reminder, we will be sending out an email that includes the recording of this, as well as PowerPoints. If you have any questions, you can always email us, lwf@unr.edu. We can always forward those questions to the speakers and get any additional questions answered. Again, I am very thankful to all the speakers for this amazing information, much needed, much appreciated. And thank you everybody for attending. I'm going to leave this post-workshop pull up and I'll be here for a few minutes.